Hi, today we're going to learn how to use VPN to stay secure and private online. Wow, this is a tough job. Just kidding. When you use NordVPN, all it takes is just a single click. See for yourself. Click, and you're browsing securely on public Wi-Fi. Click, your ISP can't see what you do online. Click, and you're in a different country. Well, virtually. Any device you have there, NordVPN has you covered. Everything else is just details. But if you care to know more, NordVPN has more than 5,000 servers all over the world. It protects your sensitive data with advanced encryption, shields you from malware and phishing sites, and keeps no logs of your online activity.
Click link in the description and get 68% discount for your first order. Using paint and water. Clean and sand the wood. Remove any stickers or unwanted nails from the wood. If it is dirty, wash the wood with gentle soap and water. If the wood is very rough, use sandpaper or a hand sander to smooth it. A smoother surface will make it easier to apply the whitewash. If you need to use soap, make sure the wood dries completely before you begin to whitewash. Consider staining the wood to make the grain more visible. Staining the wood a medium or dark brown will help the texture and knots of the wood to shine through. The paint and water technique works best on new lumber or wood with a very smooth surface. Staining the wood can help the final product to appear more weathered and aged, if that is the look you desire. The darker the stain you use, the more visible the wood will be under the whitewash. Let the stain dry completely before you begin to whitewash the wood. Mix equal parts paint and water until the paint is semi-transparent. Add more water if the paint is still too thick or opaque. Thinning the paint with water will allow the wood grain to show through after you apply the white paint. A latex water-based paint is usually the easiest type of paint to use for whitewashing. You can also buy white stains at your local paint or hardware store. However, these may still need to be diluted with water to allow the wood grain to show. The ratio of paint to water can be changed depending on how transparent you want the whitewash to be. If you want a lot of the wood to show through, add 2 parts of water to 1 part of paint. You might want to start with a 1:1 ratio, and then add more water if the paint is not as transparent as you desire. Use a clean rag, foam roller, or paintbrush to apply the whitewash. Use long, even strokes to spread the whitewash on the wood. Because the whitewash has been diluted with water, it will dry much quicker than normal paint. If you have a large piece of wood or furniture, you should work on small sections rather than attempting to cover the entire area at one time. Apply the whitewash in the direction of the wood grain. This will help the wood grain to show through. Remove the excess whitewash with a paper towel or clean rag. Allow the paint to sit for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then wipe the excess paint off with the paper towel or rag. You should wipe in the direction of the grain. Use long, fluid, and even wiping motions to remove the paint. The longer you leave the paint on the wood before wiping the excess off, the whiter the wood will become. If you want the wood to be mostly white with only a bit of wood showing through, leave the paint on for longer than 3 minutes, 4 minutes. The exact amount of time that you leave the paint on the wood can vary depending on the type of wood, the age of the wood, and the weather. Use the 3 minutes, 4 minutes as a guide, but check the paint frequently. As soon as it begins to feel tacky, the paint should be removed. Add additional layers of paint if necessary. Let each layer of paint dry completely before adding another whitewash layer. The number of layers depends on how much coverage you desire. If you want a bright, very white finished product, you may need 4 minutes 5 layers. If you want more of the wood to shine through, 1 minute 3 layers will be sufficient. Using paint and wax. Try the paint and wax technique for a distressed, vintage look. With this technique, you apply wax to certain areas of the wood before applying the paint. The paint will not stick to the areas where you have applied wax. It is an easy way to create a shabby chic whitewashed look. Use a candle to apply the wax. Instead of wax, you can also apply a thin layer of petroleum jelly. Sand the wood if necessary. Since the goal of this technique is to create a distressed look, the wood does not need to be very smooth. However, if the wood is extremely rough, a light sanding may make it easier to apply the whitewash. Use a clear or white candle to rub wax onto the wood. Rub the side of the candle along the surface of the wood. Remember, the wax will prevent the paint from absorbing into the wood, so wherever you apply wax will not be covered by the paint. If there is a particular knot in the wood grain that you want to highlight, rub the candle over it. Rub the wax randomly over the wood. The goal is to make the wood look like it has aged naturally, so you don't have to apply the wax in an organized pattern. Paint the wood with white paint. Use a latex paint and apply it to the wood, painting in the direction of the wood grain. Use long, even strokes. Depending on the size and use of the wood, you can also use spray paint. Spray paint is not recommended for walls, flooring, or larger pieces of furniture. However, if you are whitewashing a small piece of wood, using spray paint may be easier and faster than using a paintbrush. Wipe the wood to remove the paint from the areas where you applied wax. Use a rag and vigorously wipe the wood. The paint will come off the areas where you applied the wax. You can also use 220 grit sandpaper on the wood. Lightly rub the sandpaper over the wood, particularly to the areas where you applied the wax. This will remove the paint from these areas and will also add to the overall distressed, vintage look of the piece. Using the paint and drag technique. Use the paint and drag technique to create a rustic look. This technique works great with rough or reclaimed wood. The finished product will look rustic and will look like the wood of a barn. Because this technique is designed to create a rustic look, you almost never have to sand. The roughness of the wood actually adds to the final, barn-like product. The wood does not need to be perfectly clean, but if it's very dirty, wash it with soapy water. Let it dry completely before you begin painting. Pour a small amount of paint directly onto the wood. It is best to pour the paint on the center of the wood. Start with a small amount and add more if necessary. You can use any type of paint with this technique, although most people find latex paint the easiest to work with. Add water if the paint is too thick. Adding water will also make it easier to drag the paint across the wood. Use a wide putty knife or scraper to drag the paint across the wood. Spread the paint across the wood into the grain and let it soak into the grooves. If you want a light coat of paint, you can spread the paint out thinly. For more coverage, don't spread the paint as widely. Repeat this step to fill in blank areas. Let the wood dry for at least 12 hours. Let the piece sit overnight and then check it. The paint may take longer to dry in areas where you applied thick layers of paint. Make sure it is completely dry and not tacky to the touch before you move the wood. Repeat as necessary. If you want the wood to have more coverage or a brighter finish, add more paint and scrape it across the wood. Add as many layers as you like, but remember that the more paint you apply, the less the wood will show through.